The Sutton legacy of activism continues as Dr. Alex Sutton presents.
This is From Within, exploring the perception and realities from within the Black community.
Recently, there's some legislation currently in front of Congress around prison reform. Now, amidst all the things that Oz, you've talked about, and John, that are affecting African Americans in our community, now President Trump wants to release approximately 4,000 people, federal prisoners, back into the community, with with promises, but no real dollars, with no real ties to anything, but wants to bring folks back to our community. And I don't have a problem with people coming back, because I think a lot of the times, Blacks make up 38%, nearly 38% of the prison population anyway. 1 in 5 Black men have been incarcerated or currently incarcerated at some point. So, I mean, it's disproportionately racist. But at the same time, I'm really concerned about the issue of prison reform. We shouldn't, so where do you stand? Where do you guys, I'd like to hear from you, both John and Oz, about where you stand on this prison reform issue. I know the legislation talks to federal prison reform, but also I think the governors are now talking about it. So what I'd like to hear is where you stand on that. What's your political position?
John, do you want to take this first, or?
Well, look, let the brothers out. That's all I can say is let the brothers out, and we're just going to have to deal with that situation when Daddy gets home to his family. But I can't really be against it. Hey, yay.
I'm going to add to that. So when I was in the Trump Diversity Coalition, so I'm not sure if this is public knowledge, but I worked in the Trump campaign, and I worked with Pastor Darrell. One of the things that they advocated was
that we should talk about.
Happy to. But Pastor Darrell is working with the White House on prison reform and trying to figure out two things. One is the reform piece. Two is the recidivism issue, which I think is what the fear factor is for a lot of people. It's like, you put 4,000 people out there, what about the recidivism? I personally think that if we are able to fix things, like I'll give you an example, the laws that Cuomo put in place around gun control to make this state safer in his mind, the SNAP regulations, took every single misdemeanor charge and made it a felony. So and you look at the data, so since that move happened, you have an additional 2,600 some people who went and got felony charges. I'm going to tell you, they're not mostly white people, okay? They're mostly Black and Latino people. So, that's where I'm saying, like, with gun control, you need some sensibility. With criminal justice reform, we need modes to roll back these onerous laws that were put in place on the federal level by the Clinton administration that really made it difficult. I mean, what it did was it moved misdemeanors to felonies in a lot of cases. And it took a generation of young Black men and it took them away from the opportunities that they had by incarcerating them on small BS stuff. And I think that's where we start with this is one, how can we deal with things in more of a misdemeanor fashion, the way that, like, look, you would talk about white and Black. My white friends would get caught with in Pennsylvania with like a joint or something, and get, Daddy would pay something, and they get smacked on the wrist, and it wasn't like destroying their record. Here, you could have some kid who's selling dime bags because mama can't afford diapers, right? You have, and I look at the scenarios of what we're dealing with here, and you have a kid caught, immediately that becomes a felony charge. Like, these things should not be felony charges. If that's one. Two is that criminal justice reform then needs to work on how we figure out the elimination of that recidivism issue. And I don't know if it's a reintegration to the community, but I know it's definitely retraining people and giving them opportunities, because right here where I'm sitting in this neighborhood right around me, 72% recidivism. Okay? Let that sink in for a second. It's huge. It is a gigantic problem. And I think a lot of it is because they come back. You know, there's a TV show now, The Last OG, and it's a parody. But it's like, you know, he got out of jail. What are his options, right? His options are going and working at Popeyes, maybe getting a janitor's job, maybe applying for an MTA. There's not a lot of stuff that's afforded there. And I personally think that if you did something stupid, you should have the opportunity to atone for that, but it shouldn't wreck the rest of your life and your earning potential.
You know, I'm in a position to agree with you in a lot of ways. First of all, I disagree. The fact is that the Reagan administration started the draconian law, these draconian kind of rules around incarcerating people for indeterminate sentences, and it was followed up, you know, by administration after administration until recently. Those rules, because of some real clear things going on, that's changed. So I think that there are a lot of people who are in prison for small infractions, or even in prison for things that become felonies that probably 30 years ago, 40 years ago wouldn't have been. Mm-hmm. So now they are. And so here they are, they're coming out. And I agree with you in a lot of ways, because I think there is nothing for people to do when they get out of here. If they don't have any money, they don't have a place to stay, they don't have transportation, they don't have money to get the train or the bus or whatever, they can't get to a job. And then when they get to a job, Oz, the employer says, it seems to be a gap in your resume, because you say, well, I've been incarcerated, and you're out of a job.
Yeah.
You don't get the job, no matter where you go, unless they change something here. Fundamentally.
Can I give a personal story?
Yes, go ahead.
So I got a brother. Well, I got a brother. Most of us have somebody in the family.
Mm-hmm.
However, he's always been a hard worker. Always keeps a job. Spent 5 years in prison for a gun violation. Got back out of prison. Got a job. Good paying job. Keeps a job. Keeps money in his pocket. Got in trouble fighting with his girlfriend because he was on probation. He had to go back into prison. Finish more time. Comes back out. He gets a good job. Keeps a job. The kid keeps a job. The deal is he knows how to drive a, what do you call those? He knows how to drive a forklift. So as long as he's got that skill, he can always find a job. They don't care. They only care about whether or not you have, something on your record at Popeyes, because they know you're easily replaceable. So I think if we're going to move from spending, I can't remember, it's like $30,000 a year on a prisoner, or $60,000 a year on a prisoner, then if we're going to let these prisoners out, we need to allocate some funding to training these people on a job or a skill where they can sustain themselves and where it really doesn't matter, But if you're just going back to that, $7.50 job, it's so easily replaceable that they just rather not deal with somebody that's got a record.
Well, I mean, a lot of jobs won't allow you to work if you have a felony offense on your record. And until those things come, somehow we're able to deal with that issue of a person having a felony offense on their record. During the 80s and 90s, I was a psychologist in the middle of Newark. And a lot of the federal and state penitentiary parolees came to see me because they didn't know how to handle it emotionally. Continuing to be rejected when they go out to find jobs. So and the problem was there was no one to help them, no one to walk them through it, take them by the hand and show them, number one, how to find a job, and number two, how to deal with an employer who asks these kinds of questions, and seek some support from somewhere in order for them to be able to continue to work. So it's a very complex issue. I mean, I don't think we can spend a whole hour talking about it, but I think there are a lot of nuances here. I think that a lot of it is the fact that the drug laws have changed, and hopefully people's minds set around drug offenses and the prison is going to change as well. So I'm hoping that will allow more people to be able to be accepted into the communities, and that employers begin to look at these people in a more serious way, because there's only a fraction of employers that would really want to help someone who is just getting out of prison, who wants to move on in their life. By the way, I love that show. I tape it because I like to watch it. Do we have any other comments? We got about 5 more minutes, folks.
I'm just going to throw it back to trade education. I think that's where it's at, you know, because I think if you can get these kids and even adults through 6 to 12 months worth of education that puts them on the road to doing these lower level technology jobs. They're all $40, $50, $60, $70,000 to start. Right now in cybersecurity, computer managed hosting, and forensics, so computer forensics, we're going to have a shortage of right now we have a shortage of 6 million people. We're going to have a shortage of roughly about 18 million people by 2020, 2022. And so some of the thought processes that we have here, and one of the things I'm working on, which is a program called the Spike, which, you know, we're trying to get rolled out next year, is if we can train some of these kids and get them aligned with the companies, then they can go and take those jobs, and they start, you know, they can start telling their friends, they can start disrupting this process. And once they have that skill set, very much like the forklift driver, they can go anywhere because everyone will be hiring for these positions.
I agree. They're definitely going to have to.
That's great to hear. So listen, I think we've had a real lively discussion today. So I want to again thank you all, Charlie. Thanks everybody. Oz, I hope you come back with us and join in again.
I'd love to. Thank you for having me.
John, I'm really glad you're here with us, and we'll see you the next time. Thanks again, everyone.
Awesome.
From Within podcast series. www.fromwithinseries.com